Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a great broadcast for you today. I will be covering the main events of the week. It was quite an eventful week, so there's a lot to talk about. But first, I would implore everyone, please do hit the like button and also subscribe. YouTube is not a huge fan of what we do here. They find what we do violent, so they're not big fans of promoting our work. So your engagement really matters. We really appreciate it a lot, and it helps us so much. So thanks for doing all that stuff. Please do check out our Twitter and our Blue Sky. That's where we do most of our social media posts. And please do promote us on other platforms where we're not so active. Thank you. And check out Tochnyi.info. That's our website. It's got a lot of great research and articles and interactive maps and other information about our various research projects at Tochnyi. So, as I mentioned, I will be covering the news. After that, Germany to Ukraine will give his report as per usual. Then we will have a Q&A. So if you have any questions, Colby is able to join us this week, which is great. We should have a more diverse set of answers for your questions. So feel free at any point during the show to type questions in chat, and we will do our best during the show to later on answer them. Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll go ahead and jump into the news.
These are the main headlines as of February 2nd, 2025. During the night of January 25th, multiple explosions took place in Russia's Ryazan Oblast, an event that Russian authorities attributed to a drone assault on a regional refinery. According to reports from Russian Telegram channels and local officials, the incident occurred around 1 a.m. in the village of Dyadkova. Residents in the area reported hearing a sequence of blasts, estimating that approximately 10 explosions took place. Pavel Malkov, the governor of the oblast, asserted that the attack was neutralized by the country's air defense system. However, videos circulating on social media depict a significant blaze at the refinery, raising questions about the extent of the damage and the effectiveness of the defensive response. In the early hours of January 31st, an oil refinery in Volgograd, Russia, was struck by drones, resulting in a fire. Reports of the incident came from the region's governor, as well as various Ukrainian and Russian Telegram channels. Local accounts indicate that the attack occurred around 4 a.m., shortly after an air raid warning was issued in the Volgograd region due to the risk of unmanned aerial vehicles. Residents in the southern part of the city reported hearing explosions, with particular mention from local social media groups. During the night, the Supernova Plus Telegram channel shared multiple videos, one of which captured the sound of a drone overhead followed by an explosion. In another recording, a local resident provided his precise location, which was approximately 1.5 kilometers from the refinery's boundary. These videos and images circulating online suggest that the fire broke out at the refinery. Later, the governor of Volgograd Oblast, Andrei Bocharov, acknowledged that a drone attack had allegedly led to the blaze, but did not disclose the exact site of the incident. He stated that a total of 8 drones had been intercepted in the region, and one of them caused a fire within the refinery complex, which he said had been brought under control. In the early hours of the morning, Ukrainian drones targeted the Lukoil refinery in Kyiv, Russia, the country's 4th largest refinery. The attack took place around 1 a.m. and was reported by multiple Russian Telegram channels, with local residents describing 3 explosions and a subsequent fire at the facility. Situated approximately 800 kilometers from Ukraine's border, the Kyiv refinery has an annual processing capacity of 17 million tons of crude oil. While Russian officials attributed the damage to debris from intercepted drones, the reports of 3 distinct explosions from residents suggest direct impacts on the facility. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, air defense systems intercepted 104 drones that night. However, sources from Ukraine's main intelligence directorate stated that all 4 drones launched at the facility struck their intended target and caused significant damage to the refinery. North Korean troops stationed in Russia were withdrawn from the front lines in the partially occupied Kursk region after suffering substantial casualties, according to a report by the New York Times on Thursday, which cited unnamed Ukrainian and U.S. officials. This follows previous assessments by Western intelligence indicating that out of the estimated 11,000 North Korean troops sent to Russia in late 2024, approximately 4,000 had either been killed, wounded, captured, or declared missing. U.S. officials speculate that these troops may now be undergoing further training or that the Russian military planners are considering alternative deployment strategies to reduce their vulnerability. Despite being among Pyongyang's most highly trained special operations forces, these soldiers were reportedly used in standard infantry roles, exposing them to Ukrainian artillery and landmines in the Kursk region. Russia is expected to receive additional reinforcements from North Korea in the coming months, with a senior U.S. official telling the New York Times last week that further deployments could arrive within around 2 months. On January 29th, Ukraine's military intelligence agency launched a cyber operation against Russian energy giants Gazprom and Gazprom Neft, severely disrupting their digital infrastructure. The cyber specialists executed a large-scale distributed denial-of-service attack, crippling key online services. The operation coincided with the anniversary of the Battle of Kruty, a historic event in 1918 when Ukrainian cadets and volunteers mounted a desperate defense against the Bolshevik advance on Kyiv. Facing an overwhelming force of around 5,000 Bolsheviks, a small battalion of approximately 500 young students dug trenches near the city and engaged in a fierce but ultimately outmatched battle. In a statement, Hoare connected the cyber operation to the historic resistance, describing the attack as a symbolic act of defiance. The targeted systems include essential digital platforms, leaving customers unable to access their accounts, make fuel payments, or use other online services as of January 28th. Despite the widespread outages, Gazprom downplayed the incident, attributing issues to a, quote, temporary technical glitch, while providing no further details or a time frame for resolution. On January 30th, multiple Ukrainian sources reported that Ukraine's armed forces had successfully incorporated full FAB 250-kilogram aerial bombs into their drone operations, using them for precise attacks on Russian targets in the Bryansk Oblast. Photographic evidence shared on Telegram showed a FAB 250M54 high-explosive bomb mounted on a drone alongside a 120mm mortar shell for scale. Reports from Militarny indicated that in the early hours of January 30th, the 14th Regiment launched at least one modified drone to strike Novozbykov oil pumping station on the Druzhba pipeline in Bryansk Oblast. The drone carried the FAB 250M54 bomb along with 2 smaller munitions resembling artillery shells. The fate of the aircraft after the strike remains unknown, and by 1 p.m., Russian sources had not released any images confirming its destruction. In November, video footage from Dagestan, Russia showed an A-22 Foxbat light aircraft, which would be capable of carrying the bombs, converted into UAVs. However, these drones were designed for long-range missions and don't have a return capability, leaving it uncertain whether they could actually release bombs and return to base like these Ukrainian drones can. Also, Ukrainian forces are actively working on countermeasures to intercept Russian drones that operate via fiber optic cables. Recently, Robert Brovdy, the commander of Maidar's Birds Regiment, shared a video demonstrating one such successful interception. The introduction of fiber optic controlled drones is a significant evolution in the ongoing drone warfare. Unlike traditional drones, they are immune to electronic warfare countermeasures and very difficult to detect. In response, Ukrainian technology firms are rapidly developing strategies to neutralize their advantages, while also experimenting with their own fiber optic technologies. Brovdy explained that his regiment began employing a mobile radar system to detect the advanced Russian drones. Since fiber optic communication eliminates the need for radio signals, the drones are not susceptible to jamming and remain undetectable by standard electronic warfare methods. Instead, they can only be identified through visual confirmation or conventional radar designed to track aircraft and missiles. The regiment has adapted a compact radar system for this purpose. In the video, a Russian kamikaze drone carrying an anti-tank warhead repurposed from a handheld grenade launcher is seen flying at low altitude over a landing zone. Upon detection by mobile radar, Ukrainian forces deployed a drone on standby, which successfully intercepted the Russian aircraft. Brovdy advocated for the widespread deployment of mobile radar systems every 2 to 4 kilometers along the front line, paired with dedicated FPV drone units to counteract enemy drones detected by the radars. While the exact type of radar remains undisclosed, there is speculation that it's probably a microwave radar system. These radars are effective in detecting slow-moving, small aerial targets, but have a relatively short range, leaving operators with limited reaction time. Russia intends to enlist at least 126,000 soldiers in 2025 from what it refers to as the, quote, special contingent to compensate for battlefield losses in its ongoing war. This group includes convicted prisoners, individuals under criminal investigation, and those facing financial troubles such as loan defaults. According to Ukraine's defense intelligence, Moscow has set a goal of recruiting at least 10,000 soldiers each month from this category to sustain its current military operations. Ukrainian intelligence also estimates that Russia plans to mobilize a total of at least 280,000 troops throughout 2025 to replenish its depleted forces. Up next, we have economy and aid. Sweden has announced its most extensive military aid package to Ukraine since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, with a total value exceeding $1.23 billion. This marks the 18th military assistance package Sweden has provided since the full-scale invasion and brings its total contributions to $5.6 billion. The aid package consists of military equipment sourced from both Swedish and international defense manufacturers. Key components include 146 trucks, 16 combat boats, and 23 naval combat modules. Ukraine will also receive 1 million rounds of 12.7mm ammunition, as well as 1,500 TOW anti-tank missiles, as well as 200 other anti-tank weapons. Gustav guns, I hope. The package also provides essential gear for soldiers and units, along with protective equipment against chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. Beyond hardware, Sweden is investing in training programs for Ukrainian forces. This includes the continued participation in Operation Interflex, which delivers basic military training and funding for instructional initiatives throughout 2025 in the UK. $178 million from the package will be dedicated to supporting Ukraine's domestic weapons production, following a model similar to Denmark's. Of that amount, $90 million will be allocated specifically for the procurement of long-range missiles and drones. The Dutch Air Force will assist in training 26 Ukrainian military personnel as senior F-16 technicians. This was announced by the Dutch Ministry of Defense following discussions with Ukrainian and Dutch defense officials. The training is set to continue until the end of April and will take place at an undisclosed airbase. While the Netherlands has initiated the program, the Dutch military itself will not be directly involved in the instruction process. Senior technicians play a crucial role in ensuring the operational readiness of F-16 fighter jets. Their responsibilities include overseeing aircraft serviceability, maintaining combat readiness, ensuring that all necessary checks are performed before flight, and training subordinate technical crew members in maintenance procedures. They are also responsible for the security of classified components installed on the aircraft, the proper handling of assigned tools and equipment, and the safe keeping of onboard munitions. Senior technicians conduct post-flight inspections, accept aircraft upon their return, and report directly to the head of technical and operational units while supervising their maintenance teams. During a visit to the Netherlands, Ukraine's Defense Minister Rustam Umerov confirmed that a batch of F-16 fighter jets would be transferred from the Netherlands to Ukraine in 2025. The first group of aircraft were delivered in October of 2024. On January 31st, it was confirmed that Finland had delivered its 27th military aid package to Ukraine, valued at €200 million. Finnish Defense Minister Antti Hakkinen announced the decision on social media and emphasized that the package was developed in close coordination with Ukrainian officials. The latest contribution puts Finland's total military support at €2.5 billion. In addition to direct military assistance, Finland has committed to expanding its defense production capabilities by constructing a major explosives manufacturing facility. The new plant, which will be located in the city of Pori, is an investment which exceeds €200 million. Hakkinen emphasized that the decision to build the factory aligns with Finland's strategy to strengthen its domestic defense industry and enhance its supply security. The facility will address the growing shortage of explosives in Europe, a bottleneck that's currently affecting the production of artillery and mortar ammunition. Once operational, the plant will be one of only 2 TNT production sites in the European Union, alongside an existing facility in Poland. The United States has transferred approximately 90 Patriot air defense interceptors from storage in Israel to Poland, where they will be delivered to Ukraine, according to sources cited by Axios. The move is part of ongoing efforts by the Pentagon to strengthen Ukraine's air defense systems as it faces continued Russian attacks on critical infrastructure. The Patriot air defense system was decommissioned by the Israeli Air Force in April 2023, more than 30 years after it was originally deployed during the Gulf War. As Israel now relies on more advanced air defense systems such as Iron Dome, the Patriot system has been placed in storage or used for training. After the system's retirement, Ukrainian officials initiated discussions with both the U.S. and Israel, proposing that the missiles be returned to the U.S. for refurbishment and eventual delivery to Ukraine. However, it was stated that Israel was initially hesitant, reportedly delaying a decision over concerns that Russia might retaliate by increasing military support to Iran. According to an unnamed Ukrainian official, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu initially avoided engaging in discussions on the proposal for several weeks. The official further claimed that Netanyahu ultimately approved the transfer in late September, only after attempting to negotiate a separate matter involving an annual pilgrimage of ultra-Orthodox Israelis to Uman, Ukraine. The Israeli government has, of course, denied any connection between the two issues. The Czech government is advancing a new initiative to secure artillery ammunition for Ukraine, urging support from other European Union member states as the war with Russia continues. Czech Foreign Minister Jan Lipovsky emphasized that the initiative's success hinges on political commitments from EU partners. Speaking to a German publication, he noted that if EU nations contribute again, the program could significantly aid Ukraine's war effort. He also mentioned that funding options for the new procurement effort are currently under review, with the ultimate goal of maximizing the number of shells acquired. The Czech initiative already demonstrated considerable success. By the end of 2024, Ukraine's deputy foreign minister reported that 520,000 rounds of 155mm shells have been delivered, which fulfilled 80% of the program's target. Stricter U.S. financial sanctions, which began impacting Russia's Gazprom bank at the end of 2024 and expanded into 2025 to include dozens of intermediary companies involved in circumventing restrictions, have created new obstacles for Russian trade payments to China. According to Bloomberg, the financial measures have led to increased scrutiny by Chinese banks, particularly in transactions conducted in yuan. Senior executives from two Russian raw materials exporters reported that cross-border payments are again facing difficulties as Chinese financial institutions reassess their risk exposure. Concerns amongst Chinese banks stem from recent U.S. actions, with institutions taking additional time to analyze transactions before processing them. Challenges have arisen following the U.S. Treasury Department's expanded sanctions, which now include 50 Russian banks and approximately 100 companies accused of violating restrictions, including some based in China. Kyrgyzstan's OJSC Karamet Bank has been subjected to blocking sanctions due to its role in facilitating foreign currency transactions for Russia's Promsvyaz Bank, PJSC, a state-owned institution heavily involved in the Russian defense sector. The tightening of Western sanctions has contributed to a decline in Russian exports as of 2024. Between October and December, total export revenue fell to $99.6 billion, marking a 7% decrease compared to the same period the previous year. Talks between Russia and Turkey regarding the reinstatement of the Russian mirror payment system have concluded without any progress, according to the Russian ambassador to Ankara. In an interview with RIA Novosti, a Kremlin-aligned news agency, Erkov stated that there is no longer any prospects for reactivating the system in Turkey and advised Russian travelers to rely on cash instead. Discussions about restoring the payment system in Turkey had been stalled for months. In September 2024, Turkish authorities publicly stated that there were no ongoing negotiations on the matter. Since the beginning of 2024, Turkish banks have systematically declined to process transactions linked to Russia, a trend that has solidified over the last year. By early autumn, nearly all Turkish financial institutions have ceased servicing payment connected to Russia and Belarus, despite efforts by Moscow to reach some kind of compromise. The banking restrictions have made financial transactions for Russian businesses and travelers in Turkey more complicated. Kazakhstan has initiated its first oil shipment from the Kashagan oil field to Azerbaijan for further transport via the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan BTC pipeline. According to the New Voice publication, this development was announced by Kazakhstan's national oil and gas company, Kazmunaygas (KMG), marking a significant step in the country's strategy to reduce reliance on Russian transit routes. The shipment, carried by the Kazakh tanker Taraz, departed from the port of Aktau and is en route to Baku. Upon arrival, the oil will be transferred to the BTC pipe system, which transports crude oil to the Mediterranean Sea. The shift is part of Kazakhstan's broader efforts to diversify its export routes, with expectations that oil shipments to Russian pipelines will decrease by over 80%. Kazakhstan began utilizing the pipeline for oil transport last year after KMG and Azerbaijan's state-owned oil company SOCAR signed an agreement to move 1.5 million tons of Kazakh oil annually through the pipeline. In March 2024, the two companies reached a deal to progressively increase this volume to 2.2 million tons per year. As part of this transition, Kazakhstan has also conducted a trial shipment of Kashagan oil via the Caspian Sea to Azerbaijan, exploring alternative export methods. In November 2024, Kazakhstan's energy minister indicated that the country is considering a significant expansion of its oil exports via the BTC pipeline, with a potential increase to 20 million tons annually. The Kashagan oil field, located in the northern Caspian Sea near Atiru, ranks as one of the most significant petroleum discoveries in recent decades, holding an estimated 9 to 13 million barrels of oil reserves. Commercial extraction, which relies on artificial islands to facilitate production, began in late 2016. And now we have international relations. On January 29th, Georgia announced withdrawal of its delegation from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, or PACE, following the adoption of a resolution urging the country to organize new parliamentary elections. The controversy stems from Georgia's parliamentary elections in the fall of 2024, which led to significant political unrest and mass protests. The ruling Georgian Dream Party, which is often criticized for its pro-Russian stance, claimed an overwhelming victory. However, opposition groups and international observers reported extensive electoral fraud, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the results. PACE formally adopted a resolution on January 29th calling on the Georgian government to conduct fresh parliamentary elections that adhere to democratic principles. Theodoros Rousopoulos, the president of the assembly, stated that the resolution included provisions for reviewing and potentially revoking the credentials of the Georgian delegates if the government failed to comply. Although PACE had previously ratified Georgia's delegation, certain members had already faced restrictions due to concerns over democratic regression in the country. The newly passed resolution introduces additional conditions that must be met before Georgia's credentials can be ratified in the future. Beyond calling for new elections, the resolution demands the release of all individuals detained for political reasons and urges the Georgian government to take concrete steps towards resuming its integration into the European Union. Following the resolution's adoption, Georgia formally declared its decision to pull its representatives from PACE in protest. Russia has begun withdrawing its military equipment from a base in Tartus, Syria, its only naval base in the Mediterranean. Satellite images published by journalist Mark Krutov reveal that 2 Russian cargo ships, Sparta and Sparta II, have been actively transporting military assets out of the port. Following the departure of Sparta II, most of the containers and equipment previously visible at the dock have disappeared. The remaining assets are now being loaded onto the Sparta. Norwegian naval analyst Tor R. A. Iverson noted that a Russian Grachonok-class anti-sabotage vessel is providing security for the operation. The withdrawal follows reports on January 21st that the Syrian port had canceled a 49-year investment agreement with Russia's Transgas. This decision came after Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad was ousted by rebels from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. In the aftermath, cargo ships associated with the Russian Defense Ministry were granted access to the port, whereas prior to Assad's overthrow, Russian naval and transport vessels had been denied entry, forcing them to remain offshore. Several Russian warships continued to be stationed near Tartus. Also, a Russian delegation arrived in Damascus on January 28th, marking the first official visit by Russian officials to Syria since the December ousting of Bashar al-Assad. The delegation includes Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov and Alexander Lavrentiev, the Russian president's special envoy for Syria. While Russian state media did not disclose the exact purpose of the visit, the semi-official Syrian newspaper Al-Watan reported that the officials were scheduled to meet with Ahmad al-Shara, the country's new de facto leader, as well as Syria's newly appointed foreign minister. The Security Service of Ukraine has launched a criminal investigation into the unauthorized disclosure of classified information following the publication of an article by Ukrainska Pravda. The report cited statements allegedly made by Kirill Budnov, the head of Ukraine's defense intelligence, during a closed parliamentary session at the Verkhovna Rada. According to the SSU, the case was formally initiated on January 28th and focuses on the individuals who had direct access to the classified discussions during the parliamentary meeting. The controversy stems from an article published on January 27th titled Trump War Elections: What Will Shape the New Season in Ukrainian Politics. The article referenced remarks allegedly made by Budnov during a confidential session involving parliamentary faction leaders and military officials. According to an anonymous source present at the meeting, Budnov was asked about Ukraine's remaining time to act, and the source claimed that Budnov, in his characteristic calm manner, responded that if no serious negotiations to end the war occurred by summer, developments could emerge that would pose an existential threat to Ukraine. Following the publication, Ukraine's defense intelligence denied that Budanov made any statement suggesting a direct threat to the country's survival. The investigation by the SSU now seeks to determine who leaked the classified discussion to the media. Ukraine has officially attained associate membership in the Confédération Intégrée des Officiers de Réserve, or CIOR, the largest organization of reserve officers within NATO. The announcement was made at a NATO headquarters in Brussels and was also made by Ukraine's Ministry of Defense. The Deputy Minister of Defense, Brigadier General of Justice Serhiy Melnik, described this as a long overdue milestone, emphasizing that Ukraine should have joined the organization 23 years ago. He highlighted that this membership presents new opportunities, particularly in strengthening the country's reserve forces and expanding its cooperation further with NATO. CIOR President Yorn Buo welcomed Ukraine into the organization and underscored the value of knowledge sharing between reservists from NATO member states and partner nations. He expressed confidence that Ukrainian reservists will bring valuable insights and that mutual exchanges will enhance collective security and reinforce the principles of freedom. And my last two items this week, I guess one's a hit and one's a miss. Norwegian authorities announced on Friday that they released a Russian crude cargo ship that had been seized on suspicion of involvement in damage to a fiber optic cable in the Baltic Sea. After a thorough investigation, police stated that they found no evidence linking the vessel to the incident. The vessel, called the Silver Dania, which sails under the Norwegian flag, was en route between St. Petersburg and Murmansk when it was intercepted by a Norwegian Coast Guard vessel off the coast of Tromsø late on Thursday. The seizure followed reports from Sweden and Latvia that a fiber optic cable connecting Sweden's Gotland Island to the Latvian city of Ventspils had been damaged. Despite initial suspicions, Norwegian police attorney Ronny Jorgensen confirmed that the investigation yielded no findings implicating the ship in the cable damage. Authorities will continue their inquiries, but they see no reason to keep the vessel in Tromsø. Also, however, Swedish authorities have detained a Malta-flag cargo vessel and launched an investigation into suspected, quote, aggravated sabotage following damage to an undersea fiber optic cable in the Baltic Sea on January 26th. The Swedish Coast Guard confirmed to the Swedish publication Expressen that the vessel in question, the Vejan, is currently anchored near the Swedish naval port of Karlskrona. According to vessel finder data cited by AP, the ship had recently departed from the Russian port of Ust-Luga and was moving between Gotland and Latvia when the disruption occurred. Swedish senior prosecutor Mats Lundqvist stated that multiple agencies, including the National Police Operations Department and the Coast Guard, as well as the armed forces, are collaborating on the investigation. The damage was first detected when Latvia's state-run radio and TV center experienced disruptions in data transmission along the fiber optic cable linking Ventspils to Sweden's Gotland Island. In response, the Latvian Navy deployed patrol boats to examine vessels in the vicinity. According to Reuters, marine traffic data confirmed that the Vejan passed over the cable at 0:45 GMT on January 26 before being escorted to Swedish waters by Swedish Coast Guard vessels. NATO has announced that it recently mobilized ships and aircraft under its recently established Baltic Sentry mission to examine the incident. The damaged fiber optic cable, located at depths exceeding 50 meters, is expected to be repaired within weeks, unlike gas pipelines and power cables, which typically require several months for restoration. In the meantime, Latvia's state-run radio and TV center has redirected its operations through an alternative data transmission channel. And that's it for the news this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Yeah, hello guys, that would be me. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. And this week I have prepared a lot of moving images for the news segment, and I also have a video of the week just for Joseph. Therefore, I really hope that you guys are also, of course, very happy about this. We are starting with a donation of 10 backhoe loaders financed by the German Foreign Office to the National Guard of Ukraine, which were made public on Wednesday. They are intended for engineering and stabilization work in the rear positions and to assist citizens in the front line and deoccupied territories. On Thursday, the German Federal City Organization THW has donated an Iveco daily truck to the Kevchenkivsky District Administration of Zaporizhia. The vehicle will help to respond more quickly to Russian shelling in Zaporizhia and offers plenty of space for cargo transport. On the same day, they also handed over additional assistance in the form of 5 Volkswagen Crafter vans and a backhoe loader funded by the German government to the Vilnyansk and Komishivka communities in the Zaporizhia Oblast, to utility companies in the region and the Zaporizhia Regional Clinical Hospital. Again on Thursday, an EU delegation handed over 5 Volkswagen Amarok off-road vehicles, which were co-financed by the German government, to the State Special Transport Service. The vehicles will be used by their energy units to transport equipment and staff to restore electrical networks and civilian infrastructure damaged by Russian attacks. And last but not least, on Friday, 5 Volkswagen Crafter vans financed by the German government were handed over to the Kyiv Oblast. It was not shared for what they are now being used, but I assume for small logistical tasks or similar. These vans are now being distributed to the Kupiansk, Pisoshyn, and Balaklaya Hromadas. And as promised, due to the severe threats and pressure from Joseph, I this time even have a video of the week for you. Special thanks to Jay, who mentioned this video to me since he saw how I am in really, really desperate need. This video shows Ukrainian soldiers of the 1st Assault Battalion using a Danish-made RQ-35 Hydrogen UAV, of which Germany has so far delivered nearly 450 to Ukraine. To scout the movements and location of a Russian BM-21 Grad MLRS. As it can be seen later in the video, the MLRS was hit by an M4 HIMARS missile, according to the battalion. And yeah, that's it for my segment. So back to you, Joseph.
Well, thank you, sir. Yeah, that was definitely, I think, one of my favorite segments of yours. There were lots of videos, which was fun, and you had to pronounce a lot of difficult Ukrainian place names, which is also fun. So,
I'm really bad at
yeah,
this.
I think that was fun on both counts for me. Yeah, so I guess like this is maybe a segment I'm just going to call like extra news bits, because they're things I wind up cutting a lot of stuff, and it feels weird to just not mention it. So. The first thing is like Budanov denials. There's been some extra Budanov denials since I wrote my news report, and I just wanted to mention them. The first is the North Korea stuff. You basically couldn't read the news about Ukraine this week without hearing it mentioned that, you know, there was this withdrawal. If I remember, there was maybe mention of some special forces commander saying something about this. I don't know the whole story, but the point is, it maybe is most likely it was probably overblown by the media. Budanov is saying as much. I'm not suggesting that like it's true because Budanov said it, but you know, my own instinct was that it seems like they were making a huge deal out of this, and it's not super well sourced. It's like a couple comments from one publication from some anonymous sources. So yeah, Budanov basically straight up denied that that was true and said it's not. So, you know, take that for what you will. The other Budanov denial, which is kind of a rabbit hole I didn't want to go down, but I feel like we kind of need to at this point if there's kind of official acknowledgement of it, is the Georgian Legion coup attempt thing. Basically, the Slovakian government, I guess. You guys are welcome to correct me if I'm wrong at any point. I didn't read too deep into this story because, again, I took one look at it and went, wow, that's too deep a rabbit hole for the news. Anyway, the Slovak government accused the Georgian Legion of organizing a coup against the government. That's my general understanding of the situation. And Budanov basically denied that the Georgian Legion kind of existed as an entity subordinate to HOR. So that was just kind of another thing that happened was Budanov was basically more or less accused of attempting a coup in Slovakia. and he denied it and said that the people that were supposedly involved in the coup aren't under his command in any way. So that's the two Budanov denials. There was a meeting this week in Poland between Zelensky, Macron, and the president of Poland, I think Tusk, right? And they had a discussion. I couldn't find anything concrete about any outcomes. I guess I'll put it that way. Usually I'll report it in the actual news if there was an agreement made or something, but nothing that I found. They discussed stuff. I'm sure important things were said behind the scenes, but nothing public was released as a result of the talks, to my knowledge. Erlend, I think it's kind of the same situation. There was a Nordic defense meeting this week. The Nords have been doing that lately, having coordinated defense meetings. But it seems like this one was pretty run of the mill. Or did you find anything out?
Well, at least what I've read has been very superficial meetings about bringing Ukraine closer to NATO standards and cooperation agreements regarding that. I'm sure more things happen, but that's what the public statement was. So yeah, we'll see.
And then And then, my last bit of extra news was Russia blocked 420,000 websites last year, or 2024. So this year, it looks like they're increasing the pace of that, based on the first month or whatever. So I don't know, internet censorship in Russia is getting a lot more serious. It's something that I think for a long time in the Putin regime was something that they didn't really take super seriously. But it looks like they're tightening the screws on that. So that's kind of all my extra stories that I thought were worth noting. There were even more stories that I cut from the cut stuff, but I'll leave it there. So I think that's all of that stuff. Mr. Erlend, did you want to talk anything about what's been going on with you, or any stuff you've seen that was worth noting the last few weeks? Because you've been a busy bee. Maybe there's some things you've missed talking about.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. So yeah, it's been a very busy January for me. Basically, I've been 2 trips to Ukraine, driving cars and supplies down to Ukraine for the NGO that I'm a member of, which is called Fritt Ukraina. I believe the NGO is now one of the largest European NGOs providing aid to the front lines in Ukraine. We've gotten a massive boost the last year from private businesses and individuals that have been donating very large sums of money that has been helpful for the frontline units in Ukraine. So yeah, it's been super busy because driving from Oslo to Ukraine is one thing. It's 2,000 kilometers more or less, but also preparations before and takes up a lot of time. But definitely worth it. I would be going every weekend if I could, but unfortunately I have to work as well. So yeah. I guess I can try and I have some pictures. I just need to click through them first to be sure. But yeah, the project that is going on right now is public because the receiving unit actually announced it on their Telegram not long ago. So basically, we got a request from Magyar's birds. So if you're not aware, you guys mentioned it in the news, or you mentioned it a little bit in the news, that the Magyar's birds that went from being a company unit or like small sized units, company size, to a battalion. Last year it was reorganized to a regiment, but now already it's been granted the permission to form a separate brigade. So it's they need a lot of vehicles, and they asked if we could help them they got basically 50% of the funds, and then we doubled it for 70 plus vehicles. So that should be done soon, and we got down a lot of vehicles in January, more than 40, I think. So yeah,
Nice. Well, keep up the good work, guys. And yeah, oh, look at that.
just some pictures from the 2 last trips. Oh, that's the same. So yeah, also want to highlight that we have basically like a sister organization or a friend or NGO that we have a very, very important collaboration with, which is called the People's Self-Defense of Lviv. And it's incredibly important for the logistics and also for all the fundraising that is happening. They basically have an agreement where they try to double or match the donations, not for everything, but we will match the donations that they do. So that's it's very good, fantastic people there. And we also went to what is called the Field of Mars. Every Ukrainian large city has a Field of Mars, which basically is the military graveyard. This one is located next to the normal large communal graveyard, and it's where they bury their fallen, the ones that get carried home on the shield, as they say. And it's very, very impactful to walk around there. This is just Lviv. Yeah. Yes, Gao. I know that they are working with Bamberg NGO, if that's what you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I actually didn't want to mention anything publicly. That's why I used our private chat. But yeah, that's what I meant.
I interpreted your silence.
Yeah, no, I just saw the logo and I was like thinking, from somewhere I know that logo, and then you said Lviv, and I'm like, yeah, that's from where. And then I remembered that a couple of like 1, 2, maybe a third German NGO, like people who do a lot of crowdfunding for Ukrainian units and other stuff, are also working with these guys.
Yeah, I think they're one of the 10 largest NGOs providing aid, humanitarian aid, it's called it. That can be anything from vehicles for a military unit to, supplies to a hospital, a civilian hospital. So that it's a very, very big NGO.
Yeah, makes sense.
And they're doing really good work. Incredibly professional people. So yeah, I guess, I'm just a driver. I don't do much. I didn't donate millions of kroners to this. I wish I could, but I'm very happy that the people that really have the possibilities financially and also the right values actually did donate all that money. That is so important for the people that receive the aid.
But still, it's a great effort by you. You invest a lot of private time. You drove down there. You put yourself in risk of potential damage or harm by Russian attacks or whatever. So I wouldn't undervalue your stance in this. So thank you.
Well, thanks. That's kind, but I feel like I'm not doing that much. I mean, it's definitely worth it, the effort, of course, but compared to Ukrainians, not doing that much.
Well, I couldn't do it. I can't drive, so I couldn't drive this week. It's the Ukraine.
well, we all do our best. So I don't really have much more to say about this, but if you have any questions, I will try to answer.
Yeah, ask in chat if you guys have questions. Deeply security compromising questions. Erlend will answer all of them. No, Erlend, it reminds me there was an article in the Kyiv Independent, I think it was, that was about like it was by Norwegian authors. That's what piqued my interest about it. Like, if it was just some Ukrainians writing about like their opinion that Norway should like be donating more money to Ukraine because they're profiting a lot off of the gas, that would be one thing, because I think that's kind of obvious. Like, that's how I feel about it. But to me, it was significant that it was that it was Norwegian journalists who like came and did like a guest op-ed on the Kyiv Independent. So I was just curious, like, are those two journalists like prominent journalists, or are they just like scrubs? Like, or I shouldn't say scrubs, but like, are they significant people in journalism in Norway, or are they not? Is it not as significant as maybe I'm perceiving it?
So at least one of them, I believe, is a very prominent economist, and he's been also very active in saying like Norway should give, I think it was 1,000 billion kroners to Ukraine to end the war, which is about 100 billion US dollars. So I'm very happy about increasing international attention about Norway's kind of, I would say, lack, or not necessarily lack of support, but the lack of understanding that a lot of aid right now is actually important, because the government is trying to say like, yeah, we're going to give 100 billion kroners or 170 billion kroners, but over X amount of years, which, yeah, I'm sure that's good for Ukraine to know that there's going to be longevity in the support, but what actually counts is what they get now. So yeah, it's incredibly frustrating to see how our government is acting. The amount of aid compared to other countries isn't bad. Like, I want to emphasize that. Like, the amount of aid compared to Germany, compared to UK, we're just 5 million people, and still we're donating about $3 billion US to Ukraine this year. So it's not that bad. But the thing is, we have the opportunity to give a lot of money that Ukraine needs to fund its weapons programs right now, and we don't need to take a loan. We can just take it off the extra income that we get from the extra gas revenues to Europe because of the war. And that's why a lot of people are now saying that, hey, Norway is actually becoming a war profiteer. I'll try and pull the article up here. So
yeah, I mean, it sort of just comes down to like Norway is like sitting on what amounts to like that pile of money in Breaking Bad. Just like imagine that. Like, Norway has that, and it's more money than you guys could ever spend in your lifetime, the 5 million of you combined. And like, if you did, it would like cause too much inflation anyway. So like, I don't know, there's a very strong argument to be made that if you guys just take several billion of that huge pile of money and just take a piece of that pie and just give it to Ukraine, because it's not really doing, it's just sitting there, earning more money and getting bigger and more unmanageable. That in the long run, like, that's going to keep inflation in Europe down. That's going to keep security costs down, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of compelling strategic and practical reasons to just take that giant pile of Breaking Bad money and just cut off a little slice of it and just be like, here you go, Ukraine, go stabilize Europe for us. And yeah, so I think that's kind of the argument here. It's not necessary. I think it sounds maybe a bit punitive to say that Norway is war profiteering, although there's a fair case to be made for that. But I think there's also a fair case to be made that even if you don't want to chastise Norway, you can definitely say, like, it would be to their strategic benefit. It doesn't benefit them strategically to just have a pile of money that keeps getting bigger. It does strategically benefit them in the long run to have security in Europe and lower inflation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of, I think, the pro argument, right?
Yeah. And, the thing is, all this money is being piled up in our sovereign wealth fund. And right now, even though we have enormous gas and oil revenue from the sovereign wealth fund, what we earn most is actually the revenue from the shares and bonds and properties that the sovereign wealth fund invest in itself. And stability in Europe is very important for the value of the sovereign wealth fund. If we have a situation where Ukraine basically collapses and millions of refugees are pouring into Europe, financial instability will definitely be one of the consequences of that. And I'm sure it will also impact the American stock market, etc., where most of the revenue is coming from. So there's a good argument to say that one of the best investments we could do is into the Ukrainian military. So it's really frustrating to see that the arguments, in my opinion, from the government, where they're like, yeah, we can't give more, because if we give more than most, then other countries will give less, etc. These have been some of the arguments stated by the prime minister, and that's absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. It's very sad to see that the government is really not proactive, which is my largest regret. It used to be one of the best nations in donations to Ukraine in 2022. I would say it was very proactive, early to give lethal aid. Also, artillery was given in the beginning. A lot of it promised air defense that has been delivered since, but yeah, Norway has the means and in some way a moral responsibility to give more than the others, in my opinion, because one of the large piles of money that you can find out there is growing bigger and bigger because of the war. And it's not because of weapon sales directly only, it's because of gas that is being bought from Norway instead of Russia, because sanctions on Russia and divestment from the Russian energy market. So
do you guys feel maybe a little left out because, like, the whole Baltic Sea cable thing, like, you guys aren't really like right there on the coast, and then you were like, hey, we have a Russian sabotage ship too, but then it turned out it was innocent and you had to let it go. And so are you feeling like a little left out because of all that?
I wouldn't say left out, because we have other reasons where we could have definitely been taking Russian ships into.
Sweden and Finland just released a package together, Erlend. Like,
yes.
Where were you guys?
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Denmark doesn't have any, they don't have to say anything, because I know where Denmark's heart is, Erlend.
Well, what I do want to say is that when Denmark and the Netherlands together invested into newly built CV90s for Ukraine, I think that would have been a great opportunity for Norway to match both of those nations' donation, at least to boost that procurement. But I don't know what's happening. So.
Yeah, because it sounds to me like you guys do have a very, like, I don't know, the one argument you said it kind of against supporting Ukraine seems to be like, well, what if we are too nice and then everyone's like, we don't have to help Ukraine? Again, a weird argument, but I think at this point it would be fair to say to those people, well, you're maybe a little behind. Like, Sweden just gave a big military package. Finland is not only investing in military packages, they gave one this year, and relative to their GDP, they've given quite a lot, but they're also building a new explosives plant and investing like serious money in that. So, like, I don't know, it just seems like if comparing yourselves to your neighbors is an important political point that is being made about whether or not there's enough support for Ukraine by the public, like it seems like that could be a point where you could say, well, are we really keeping up with our neighbors? You know what I mean?
I don't know how to answer that really. So the thing is, there are things happening that isn't being written about as well. Norway is kind of similar to Sweden in many regards, that we sometimes do a press release where we say exactly what has been given in the package, but in general, that's not really happening. So you will not find a complete account of what has been donated from Norway to Ukraine, or money that has been transferred, or etc., training that has been occurring, even though there are some statements. Sweden sometimes do the big press release, but we know that some equipment has been transferred, and then never really know what happened. So it's a little bit hard to judge exactly what's happening right now, because yes, the increase from 2024 to 2025 was kind of substantial. Like the opposition managed to pressure through a minimum amount of 35 billion kroners to Ukraine for 2025. That's a floor, so that means it can be, and probably will be, more through the year, because we do budget revision here. But still, it's hard to know exactly what's going on now, because we haven't seen any big press releases, etc.
Yeah, it's just I'm just looking out for you guys. It just seems like there's a lot of multilateral organizations being formed to protect the sea cables, and various meetings being held in Helsinki. And I just want to make sure you guys are,
We're in on those
Okay.
meetings. Like there is a new kind of I would say power group being formed, that it's the Nordic countries, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and the Baltic countries, and they now have regular meetings on the political and military level. So things have definitely happened, and also very fast to that regard. And I expect that cooperation to be stronger in the years to come, and more military exercises, more military contributions to the Baltics, etc. But I wish our government was a lot harder on Russia relations as well. We still have Russian fishing vessels that are allowed to go to port in Norway, even if it's under very strict control. It's still, I don't understand why we should just ban them. And we have a border passing with Russia up in the north that is still open, and it should just be closed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and now you got I don't know, lots of stuff to worry about. But anyway, I think it's maybe. Do we have any other topics we want to cover with the panel, or should we go to chat questions?
Well, there's one question for this that I'll answer. Kellen asks, what's the current political climate in Norway with respect to Ukraine support? Will it change in 2025? The climate, at least in the population, has shown to be that people want more support to Ukraine. And I think it's more than 85% support for military aid to Ukraine. And more than 50% of those want the support to be stronger. So on a popular level, it's definitely present. The problem is that the two major parties, so the Labour Party and the Conservatives, are not very proactive in their willingness to grant more money to Ukraine than we're giving right now. Same kind of situation as we have in Germany. The Greens here, and also the Liberals, so the Liberals being a center party here in Norway, they both are the strongest on support for Ukraine. The Greens have said, yeah, let's give the 1,000 billions, etc. And the Liberals have said, let's give 100 billion kroners to Ukraine this year. So there are parties that push for stronger support. In my opinion, the break kind of happens with the leader of both the Conservative and the Labour Party, because I know, in general, at least in the Labour Party, and also I know several individuals in the Conservative Party, there's a general opinion inside the party that we should give more. It's just both the leaders of the two main parties are kind of conservative in this question, which is incredibly sad, because I think if there was an open debate and an open vote in the parliament, we would have gotten a lot better budget. But it's all being horse trading behind the scenes.
Well, Erlend, the solution's very clear. We just go to Budanov and do a coup.
Well, anyways, it's I think it's positive, because also things are happening. Like the government basically collapsed last week, but collapsing.
It's like one of those European things where I'm like, I don't know whether to be like good or I don't know. That sorry.
No, it's good in my opinion. But that's my personal political view. The government has been a minority government formed by the Center Party, which is some sort of a farmers' party, and the Labour Party, and they've had support from the Social Left Party to form a government. And basically, the Center Party just left the government. There will be a new government appointed this week, and it will consist only by the Labour Party, and they've basically already gotten consent.
Farmers.
So the farmers are out, and the farmers have been definitely also a kind of a break for Ukraine support, because they've been like, if we give support to Ukraine, we got to give an equal amount of support to farmers and small companies in Norway. So there, you can only do that for so long, because then that means taking more money from the sovereign wealth fund into the economy, which causes inflation. We have had large problems with inflation the last few years in Norway, mainly because of the incredible amount of money pouring in because of the extra gas and oil revenues. So it's been a problem. That party has been, I would say, lame at best. And I guess the same question is for Gao about Germany.
How's the Farmers' Party in Germany?
The Gartenpartei is doing very good. No, joke aside, the current political climate has not changed here in Germany at all. It's still the same. All democratic parties are still pro-Ukraine. The only thing right now is that we're close to the elections. It's exactly 3 weeks until the next elections. And so right now the election campaigns of all parties are, to be honest, like more important than actual Ukraine assistance. They're debating since weeks about the 3 billion euros in additional Ukraine assistance. They're not debating whether they should do it or not, which is very positive in my opinion. They're debating about where to get the money from. And it currently doesn't look like they find a solution for it, as it would need the approval from the chancellor and the Minister of Finance, controlled by the chancellery, since it's the same party. Doesn't seem that way that Scholz will, bow to others. So it's a little bit critical, but in 3 weeks everything is over, and then we can hopefully move on to getting to our old back. And I think that's a good summary of the current political climate here in Germany.
All right. Mr. Colby, how you doing, first off?
I'm okay, thank you. Glad I could be here today.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we're glad you're here. So yeah, I just wanted to ask if you have anything published lately, or anything you want to bring people's attention to that you posted about, or something like that.
Thank you. New column for the Insider coming soon. I don't know exactly when it'll be going live. Probably this week. But stay tuned for that. That's going to be talking about sort of the situation with the artillery duel and the role that artillery is playing in the war, and sort of where we stand with the supply of either side. So that'll be coming soon. And then as always, you can find me at Defense Archives as well. There'll be hopefully a lot of stuff coming there as well. I have posted something a week ago, I guess, on the latest arms sales figures for last fiscal year in the US. So that's up, and hopefully some more stories coming over the next month.
Nice. Colby, you're the only person when I'm working on the news. Sometimes you'll just appear. It'll be like, analyst Colby Badwar says, et cetera, and I'm just like, hey, I know that guy.
Yeah, there's a few Ukrainian outlets that seem to come to me a lot for a lot of their content. So
yeah, so I guess I don't have a specific question, but about the situation, I guess, with the U.S. But it seems like the general picture right now is it's still kind of up in the air, right? Like military aid hasn't stopped. Humanitarian aid has kind of stopped across the board. It's not really specific to Ukraine, but like there's not really a super definitive answer, and we haven't had any major developments, I guess, in the US in terms of Ukraine policy, right?
Developments in Ukraine policy? No, I mean, not yet. The administration, the new Trump administration, has been fairly quiet about this. They haven't really made any big decisions. Obviously, there was the broader freeze that the State Department put on all foreign assistance, but that's has nothing to do with Ukraine in particular. And the impacts there seem to be primarily just around some of the work that USAID has done. So there are some impacts, as best we can tell, but not really on the security assistance side so far, because most of the key security assistance comes through the Pentagon, and the Pentagon has not had any policy changes so far. So
yeah, so I don't know. It's been kind of an interesting first few weeks, I guess. We haven't seen like a huge reversal on Ukraine, but we also, of course, haven't seen like a surprising like fastidiousness towards Ukraine either. So we're still gonna wait and see, I think, and if we see any developments that might indicate a more concrete stance going forward, I guess we'll like keep everybody appraised. Yeah. Do we have any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, Kellen asks, has there been any new weapons shipments or orders under Trump? What's the impact of foreign aid freeze on Ukraine, humanitarian, etc.?
Yeah, as I said, I mean, there's some impacts on the humanitarian aid. I've never tracked humanitarian aid, so I can't really expound too much on exactly what's happening. There's been a little bit of reporting about what the impacts are, but I haven't gone and validated any of that. As far as the security assistance goes, there's been no change, really. The Pentagon is still executing previously directed drawdowns, and that's basically it. There's been no new drawdowns that have been announced, but drawdowns don't actually need to be publicly announced, so they could theoretically be there could theoretically be new drawdowns that have been directed that we just don't know about because there was no public announcement, because that's not required by law. They just have to tell Congress. So I would suspect that there probably haven't been, but it's not totally out of the realm of possibility. But I mean, the main thing is that the Pentagon continues to execute the previously directed drawdowns, and there's probably a fairly large quantity of material from those previously directed drawdowns that still has not been delivered yet. So aid continues to flow.
Yeah, my general understanding of the humanitarian situation is something like, like USAID was doing stuff like small loans for like Ukrainian farms, right? Things like that. And so I imagine there's probably like employees who work for that program whose job it was to like stamp loan applications or whatever. And they're kind of just sitting there going, I guess we don't have any loan applications to stamp. And they're kind of sitting around going, what's going on with our jobs and our lives? But like Colby said, it's not related to the military stuff. And again, I'm not suggesting that doesn't have an impact. It certainly does. But I do want to say, like, it doesn't seem like it's specifically hostile towards Ukraine. Like, they're not doing it because they've decided Ukraine shouldn't have that stuff. There's been a general freeze on all of that. It might resume. We'll see. So we'll have to wait until the freeze stops to kind of get more of a clear picture. And I think we're still waiting. I haven't seen personally any clear actions from the new administration that tell me one way or the other, like how this is going to shake out. So I'm, cautiously optimistic so far, I guess.
I mean, any aid that is cut from civilian kind of aid, humanitarian relief or budgetary aid, etc., is definitely going to have a large impact on Ukraine's output militarily. So that's a big problem if U.S. aid is basically cut down. As far as I understood, the latest kind of development is that the whole program is going to disappear, and maybe there's going to be a new American aid program set up, but the U.S. aid as an agency is going to be cut. That's definitely very, very dramatic, not just for Ukraine, of course, but that's not something we should disregard as a big problem for Ukraine also on the military side. Short term, I guess Europe needs to really try and step in on that, because we can't really do anything more. I don't think we can diplomatically fix that problem with the US. So we'll see. I hope that politically in Congress something is going to happen, but I see that as very concerning.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, direct US budgetary support was important. Just like I would say, just in general, like foreign budgetary support has been keeping the Ukrainian government more or less running as it has been functioning during the war. And I would say the prospects of the US providing new direct budgetary support are pretty limited. There's probably the possibility of a loan, but I mean, we don't need to get into speculation. But as you said, I think probably the most likely outcome here is that like Europe is going to have to offset that cost. And I mean, you're absolutely right. It sucks. There's no way around that. But I'm at least hoping that direct military assistance doesn't stop. And so far that hasn't happened. So I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping that new weapons arrive in Ukraine from the US.
Yeah, like on an personal opinion note, I really hope that there's going to be vital military aid coming from the US. That's kind of the only thing Europe cannot handle on its own. And then I focus on what we can do in Europe. I think, unfortunately, the political climate in the world now is it's at the place where Europe needs to really focus on what Europe can do, show its force, and then anything other than that is kind of a bonus, especially with regards to Ukraine. So yeah, well,
yeah, I want to say,
but I want to say that I'm like relieved that from some of the statements about the U.S. military aid and the prospects of that in 2025 at least.
Yeah, I want to say that recently, Root, the head of NATO, do I have that right?
Mark Rutte, yeah.
Yeah. I want to say he made comments that were to the effect of like, yeah, like Europe it's on the table that Europe could buy weapons from the US, right? And I mean, ultimately that kind of seems like what might need to happen under Trump. I'll just put it that way. Like Europe might need to buy weapons from the US and give them to Ukraine because as you said, there's kind of no way around the fact that Ukraine needs the weapons. But I'm just saying that I'm positing that as like a worst case scenario. As you said, I'm optimistic and I'm just hoping, just because I like to hope in the world, that the flow of weapons will continue from the U.S. Better than it did. I mean, quite frankly, under the Biden administration, and that it'll at least keep happening at that level and hopefully more. But if not, I think it's maybe still on the table that like there's still options out there, but of course I don't know. Ukraine really needs help. I think it's very crucial inflection point in the war, and I think Russia right now hasn't shown any signs that they're ready to give up or quit. Like it's again another thing I've kind of glossed over in the news is like stuff Putin says because I don't really like to report when I can avoid talking about Putin. I try to. And he basically has been saying lately that he doesn't recognize Zelensky as the legitimate leader of Ukraine or capable of having negotiations. I didn't really look into kind of what he was saying about that, but I guess he's either kind of saying there needs to be some kind of election or something, or that I guess what I'm asking is like, okay, practically speaking, what does that mean? Does it mean that he's not willing to negotiate with anyone? Or does it mean he's only willing to negotiate with the US? Or does it mean he's demanding like some kind of election and then he'll negotiate with the new president or whatever? Like, what is he saying? But the general point of that is he's not going to negotiate with the current leader of Ukraine. So Russia doesn't show any signs, I think, of negotiating. So yeah, Ukraine needs support, I guess. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess this is for Colby then, because I remember 2 weeks ago we were addressing this, but we didn't really have a great answer. Is Ukraine producing 155 millimeter artillery shells, I guess, domestically at this time? There's conflicting news on this.
My understanding is that yes, they are, but it's not a large number. And there's been a lot of issues with standing up those new production lines. But my understanding is that there is a small number of 155 millimeter ammunition that is being domestically produced. Obviously, they've been producing the Bodana. I think those barrels are being produced domestically, although maybe they aren't. But I think they are. But the ammunition has been a challenge.
Mr. Colby, sir, I'm proud to say that's more or less what we said. And it's only because I heard it from you. Have you seen a picture of any of the 155? That was one thing. We've seen pictures of the 122. I remember that's what we talked about, but we haven't seen. No one at the time had seen any pictures of the 155. Have you seen the images?
I can't remember, honestly. I may have at one point or another, or at least a claimed picture, but I don't have anything that sticks out in my mind. So yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. Any other questions, gentlemen, from the chat?
I just wanted to remind that at least 2 weeks ago when we talked about this, there are programs both from Nammo in Norway and also from Rheinmetall to develop 155 millimeter artillery production lines in Ukraine. And then on the barrel front, we know that there's at least both blanks and barrels being donated from the UK. So if they can donate blanks, that means Ukraine at least has the ability to bore out and do the last part of the production of 155 millimeter barrels, I presume, unless those barrels are for other calibers, that could be also the thing. But yeah, I don't think there is any detailed information on Ukraine's barrel production capabilities that I've seen, at least.
Yeah, I feel like they're definitely cranking out that new artillery system. So it seems like they've got at least enough barrels to do that, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that seems to say something to me, but I don't know what.
Yeah. Of course, would be nice to have that information, but that's probably going to be kept very secret for a long time. Can't see any more questions. Well, oh yeah, well, this one is a big one. For each panelist, what is your general prediction for Ukraine in 2025? Strength of the AFU, Russian army? Just curious. Aye, Kellen, you're giving us a. This one is difficult to answer. Who wants to start?
I'll just say a bunch of stuff that it's not true, so probably not good. It's probably
I mean,
not good to ask me.
We answered this question, I don't know, at the beginning of the year or at the very end of last year. I remember somebody asking this. So I would just refer back to whatever I said then.
Okay, well, I don't remember answering this question specifically, but yeah, we had the prediction thing. That's true. Well,
I'll put it this way, Erlend. I think our main concern still for the Ukrainian military is still manpower, right? We see the Russians getting serious about the manpower issue. Like the Russians continue to do these crazy meat grinder assaults, and they continue to lose like insane numbers of soldiers, but they do continue to manage to recruit them. They have like, I guess I'll put it this way. They have three main sources of recruits at this point. The so-called undesirables that I mentioned in the previous news report, like just like debtors, prisoners, people the Russian state doesn't like. They're just like, send them to the meat grinder. Send them now because times are only going to get tougher. Russia's got less money to deal with them. Then number two group is they have every 2 years or every year or whatever, a new wave of conscripts. And they like those conscripts legally aren't allowed to go to Ukraine, but Russia still has two things they can do with them. Number one, obviously there's still Kursk. Like right now, there's an active front, so they could probably just send them there and then free up certain professional troops for other things. But the other thing is, it's highly likely that they're going to pressure those kids to like join the military, like sign a contract, right? They're gonna do whatever it takes, lock them in the banya, whatever they got to do to get them to sign that contract, and then they're just put in the meat grinder. So that's the second source, is the conscription and coercion, signing a professional contract to go into the occupied territories. And then the third source, and there's like a couple other sources like mercenaries and stuff, but the third source is like monetary incentives. They provide like a pretty significant, for Russian standards of living, like cash bonus right now for people, especially in like the core provinces. It's usually done at the state level. Like they've got to meet certain numbers, so they provide various bonuses to like families and cash bonuses and stuff. And federal does too. They like sort of match it. Like there's a big cash bonus, so people join for money. So those are like, I'd say, the three sources of manpower for Russia, and they look pretty solid for Russia going forward. For Ukraine, I think we're really concerned about Ukraine's kind of not only their manpower situation demographically and just like in general, like they're a smaller country than Russia. Just like on, all things being equal, they're already smaller, but they don't seem to be taking measures that would lead us to feel confident that they have enough manpower to deal with the fact that Russia looks a lot more solid on the manpower front than Ukraine to me right now, personally. And that's my main concern in going into the next year. Erlend, do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I want to say that the Russians definitely have recruitment problems as well, and their absolute max recruitment was still in 2023, where they had a lot more success in drawing in contract soldiers. They've had to raise their bonuses to meet for the local regions to meet the recruitment goals. They've had to raise their bonuses to absolutely astronomical numbers, which basically would ensure financial safety for the individuals if they come home from the contract alive. But still, they couldn't meet their goals in most of the regions last year, and the numbers have been dropping. And those have been the official reported numbers. I don't know if there's any dark numbers on this as well. But I think that if Russia is dependent on that kind of manpower to be able to continue the war, then they will face problems unless they start mobilizing again. And that's something Putin and the Kremlin has been trying to avoid at all costs. And we'll see if that has to be changed for them to be able to continue their efforts in 2025 and beyond. But I think there's a lot of indications that the Russians are definitely shorter on armored vehicles, on tanks specifically. There's a lot less tanks being fielded on the battlefield lately, and they're going to have a big problem with artillery as well. We see that they now, most of the artillery shells that they're getting is coming from North Korea and Iran. That's not necessarily something that is going to be sustainable for the Russians. What happens when the North Koreans and the Iranians are not willing to provide any more shells and barrels to them? That's going to be a big issue that they will have to solve. So there are number of problems for the Russians as well. I do think that the Ukrainians are working hard on recruitment, but I don't think the necessary steps have been made necessarily, or that they have the resources to take those necessary steps. You can talk all you want about money, but the training resources that Ukraine has are finite. You can't just magically make people, instructors, logistic units, etc., that are needed for training to take place appear. It's a problem that we should have handled a lot earlier as well. Yes, Ukraine could have done more, especially in the past, earlier when in 2022, 2023, when they had some sort of breathing room. But right now, I'm not sure if Ukraine really has room to do more on recruitment. But I do want to say that Ukraine is doing a lot of good things on military organization, military planning. There's been a lot of scandals in 2024 and also in the beginning of the year, like the 155th mechanized brigade has been talked about a lot, but there's been a lot of these scandals. And I would like to say that there's a positive in this, and it's also that the fact that it's kind of more accepted to talk about these things and to publicly criticize leaders. I really hope that is not just because of an increased number of problems, but also because of more transparency. And I know for a fact that there has been a lot of good things done in organization in the Ukrainian military, and the Magyar Birds Brigade is one example of a really successful way of integrating unmanned small drones in combat and having really good effects from it. So that's just one story. I know there are more of those success stories as well in the Ukrainian military, and then I hope it adds up to something that will grow into a force that is going to be really, really difficult to handle for the Russian. So we'll see. I think 2025 might be a year where the war might be decided, but I don't think it will end in 2025 at all. I really don't think there's going to be an end to the conflict in 2025, but we might see the turning point at some point during 2025.
Let me ask you, Erlend, like in the field of drones, right? It seems like last year, right? Of course, not me. I wasn't doing the work, but there were researchers at Tochnyi who were keeping track of the numbers, very careful track of the open source information, the available video evidence. And it was pretty clear that Ukraine had an advantage in terms of actual strikes. Ukraine was carrying out more successful strikes. So Ukraine had an advantage in actual numbers of drone strikes. There were people who went so far as to tell us that there were secret numbers that contradicted that we were basically wrong, that Tochny's sort of data was wrong, their data collection methods were wrong. But by the end of the year, as far as I can tell, everyone had publicly admitted and acknowledged, including both the president of Ukraine, the president of Russia, and the people who called us wrong. Suddenly, we're just saying it like it was, they had been saying it all along, that Ukraine produced more drones and that Russia produced some drones, but that it looks like EW and other reasons, maybe disruption by Ukrainian strikes, I don't know, meant that they weren't actually able to get the drones that they produced like to the front line being used, right? So I would say last year there was a very decisive drone advantage to Ukraine. This year, I guess my concern is it does look like Russia has been scaling up production. And I want you to correct any of this if it's wrong, Erlend. Russia has been scaling up production. And they're, I don't know, like, I'm not saying that they're going to ever get an edge. I think Ukraine has demonstrated a much more sophisticated use of drones throughout the war, like especially last year. We saw the firebombing drones. We see the heavy drones. I report on like drone innovations all the time, and it really seems like Ukraine's kind of ahead when it comes to actually useful stuff. The Russians do some experimenting, and they definitely have some successes. Like, I don't want to undersell that, but when it comes to, I would say, like working prototypes to full-scale weapons, for example, the drone boats that shoot down helicopters, like Ukraine's ahead in that field of innovation. But anyway, what do you think about this upcoming year for drones? Do you think that Russia is going to be able to ramp up production, or do you think that Ukraine is going to continue to have, I guess, I don't want to call it supremacy, but I guess maybe superiority might be the word in that field?
Well, so I would defer to Andrew's numbers and also statements from both the military in Ukraine and the president that yes, Ukraine definitely has an advantage on the numbers as well. Maybe not in every single different category of drones, but in general terms, Ukraine is producing and fielding more drones than Russia. But I think that the limit isn't necessarily on the production number now. I think it's a lot more on the pilots and the ability to arm drones and deploy them. So we're kind of reaching that limit. Of course, more drones always better, but there's a certain limit to what you can physically field because of manpower. What I also would like to say is that it seems that Ukraine, at least on most levels, have a lot more advanced drone program. A lot of the independent drone manufacturers are also very, very advanced in Ukraine. So, and also in combination with a doctrine that seems to be a lot more well thought through than on the Russian side, where strike drones, being it FPV or heavy bombers, are working systematically in tandem with the observation drones, with artillery, with infantry, and also with EW to a lot larger extent than on the Russian side, where it seems to be that yes, there is some attempt on doing that, and we've heard that they're trying to reorganize their drone program and their drone forces to work more integrated with infantry units, etc. But from what we've observed, at least, we've seen that Ukraine has done that successfully in 2024, and that reorganization has really had a really strong effect, not only on land but also on the sea. So I wouldn't say that I'm a very well versed in the sea drone program, even though I've been trying to look at it, but it's also a lot more secretive than FPVs and heavy bombers. And especially on heavy bombers, we can see that Ukrainians have a lot more success, and they have a domestic production program which is producing a lot of heavy bomber drones, and a big variety of them as well. And we see that the Russians are talking about capturing Baba Yaga drones. What they call Baba Yaga means basically just a big bomber drone. It can be a vampire, can be a other octocopters or hexacopters as well that Ukraine uses. And if they want to capture them, that means they probably want to learn from what Ukraine is doing on that field. So I would say that they are ahead, but still one of the reasons why we hear stories from Ukrainian soldiers on the front line of Russia being dangerous in the drone warfare is because they're really doing a lot of damage on Ukraine as well with drones. The fiber optic drones have been kind of the hype of 2024 or the end of 2024, where Ukraine didn't really have a specified defense for it. And that's all when a new weapon is introduced where you don't really have a way to counter it, then you can feel the difference, and you can also you get a lot more scared because you don't know that you have anything that can counter it. That feeling probably is really bad, and I've heard stories from soldiers that say that this is kind of scary compared to other FPV drones. But at the same time, the fiber optic drones have been fielded in a very limited way compared to the normal FPV drones, and still normal FPV drones from the Russians are doing a lot more damage. So I wouldn't say that's going to be the main threat, also because we already seen Ukraine develop several capacities to counter those that probably is going to surprise the Russians a little bit. You mentioned
And
one.
I think
in
that
the
fact
news,
in and of
so.
itself speaks to like they feel safe. Like, in other words, the drones that don't have the fiber optic cables are being suppressed, or I'm protected by electronic warfare, or at least I'm warned about them, or you know what I mean? Like, the fact that they're afraid of the fiber optic ones to me implies that they're not as afraid of the not fiber optic ones. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's just natural to feel more protected when you have a system with you that is at least supposed to and definitely does work to a certain degree against one threat. And then when that threat has been iterated into a variant where you know that that system that you carry isn't going to help you against it, that's going to make you scared. And of course, it has done a lot of damage in the areas where it has been deployed. It was kind of a Russia surprise element in 2024, maybe. But at the same time, it is, if you look at the numbers, at least from the published footage, it's still very, very small compared to the numbers of conventional FPV drone strikes from Russia that has been successful. So it doesn't really make sense that people would be screaming that much about it. But at the same time, putting yourself in the mind of a soldier at the front line is really difficult. So yeah, it's hard to judge those kind of fares, really.
Yeah, I think you gave a really interesting summary, though, and I would go with like Erlend's summary about drones, which was, I'll do my best, right? Like 2024, I think, was a question of like who could produce more drones. That was like a really open question, and I think Ukraine came out on top of that ultimately. But yeah, all that to say, this next year, it's no longer about just a question of raw production. It's now a question of like organization. And there was a time when Russia had integrated, this is back, in like 2014 or whatever, they had integrated their drones with their artillery forces quite effectively and to devastating effect against Ukraine. So Russia had a track record of being relatively on top of this whole question of like, how do you integrate drones with your military command and with, all that. But now, Ukraine has actually set up separate branches of the military for, UAV stuff and USV, all the acronyms for drones. And it's like, I guess what I'm saying is this year it's now a question of they've sort of reached saturation in terms of production and in terms of manpower that they can dedicate to this. It's now a question of like who can actually organize their drone forces better and sort of leverage them to greater strategic effect on the battlefield and in terms of for example, hitting Russian refineries every week, at least two to three, like I report. So like to me that seems like kind of the summary of what you were saying, right? That it's a question of who's going to create an organization and a doctrine around drone usage going forward. That's what kind of 2025 is about versus necessarily raw production. Production is obviously still important, but it's not going to be the key race like it was last year.
Yeah, and also when I emphasize that Ukraine, as so well documented from our associate Artem, has been doing very well on counter UAS with FPV drones. Of course, FPV drones is just one element into that equation, but counter UAS is probably also a field where Ukraine is ahead of Russia. And if Ukraine can take out enough surveillance drones, and not just the fixed wing ones, but also smaller ones, then that's going to mitigate a lot of the problems that they've had with the fiber optic drones. Because I don't think fiber optic drones are going to be used so much for surveillance, even though that might be also a case. But in general, you want a high flying, long enduring platform to do that ISR mission, while it seems like fiber optic drones are a lot more adapted to strike drones.
Yeah, death kites are a dead end, just like turtle tanks. I don't know. This war's resulted in, I think, a lot of creativity. I think we're going to see a lot of a lot of ideas. But yeah, I think right now Ukraine's ahead on the innovation front. It seems to me like their ideas are more lasting. Like the flamethrower drone seems really effective. Obviously, Russia's gonna either copy it at some point or develop some countermeasure. But the videos I saw of that flamethrower drone were pretty nuts. I don't know, all the other drones we mentioned.
This question is a lot easier to answer, in my opinion, even if it sounds not so easy. I think it's fair. So, is this war going to be determined by drones or aircraft or troops? I know all, but a little more subtle than just that all will matter. To me, it's pretty evident that this is it's a war of attrition. That doesn't mean that innovation is going to have, not have a big role. It is, but at the end of the day, it's the big equation of attrition that is going to determine this war, in my opinion.
I think troops are still the decisive factor. Personally, I think that's easy to say. I guess Russia has a lot more troops, and they just keep throwing them at Ukraine, and it's not really working. Although there's maybe an argument that it sort of is, but I would say it's not sustainable. Ultimately, the drones and the aircraft are important, but you have to have the troops on the ground take the ground at some point. And it seems to me now the issue is, if I understood correctly when Andrew talked about it, right, they have these layered defenses, right? So both Ukraine and Russia Hopefully less so often Ukraine, and there's a lot of anger about, why are the fortifications not done? But the point is, in an ideal world, either side would have about 5 layers of defenses, right? And so you break through one layer, and it's like by the time you get through layer 3, the reinforcements are there, and then you're stuck in a bunch of defenses, bogged down, and like the counterattack comes and it's bad, right? And so that seems to be the ultimate problem. And the ultimate solution there is still you need the troops on the ground to crack that thick skin of the layered defenses. And if you can get through that, theoretically, you could do some crazy stuff. Like you could make certain sectors of the front line, like you could open up whole areas that weren't open before and change the game quite a bit, right? But yeah, that's the issue, is like right now, there doesn't seem to be a solution to the thick defense, reasonably robust. Like the Ukraine was able, in a few limited circumstances, in both Kursk and before that in Kharkiv, they were able to, like, I don't want to say completely catch Russia off guard, but Russia wasn't able to leverage the full like 5-layer defense at that time, and the defense they had in place wasn't robust enough. Like, as far as I understand, the guys kind of gave up or ran, or weren't super stiff in their resistance to what the Ukrainians threw at them. So, like, to me, it's still decided by troops. Like the big movements in the war so far have been decided by troops. It's been when Russia's troops have been weak and Ukraine's troops have been strong. That's when the big decisive moves have happened. And, at the end of the day, like, Russia is gaining territory very slowly, and they're doing that by constantly sacrificing like tons of troops, right? So the aircraft and the drones, they play a big role. They've definitely like shaped the contours of the war quite a bit, and they're terrifying. Like, I don't know how else to put it. If I was a troop on the ground, I would be terrified. But it's, to me, the troop is still the center of the war, like for a little while. I don't know. It's all getting pretty crazy out there with humanoid robots. I'm seeing all kinds of crazy Google ads for humanoid robots, Erlend. It's freaking me out. But yeah, like, my point is, I think that for now, the troop is still the center of the war. And yeah, the tanks are all getting blown up, and it's still the troops are the ones that are making stuff happen.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think, yes, on the general pressure that Russia keeps up every day, troops is the deciding factor. But at the end of the day, when they need to traverse difficult territory or terrain to take new land, they generally do that with armored support. It might not seem successful from the losses, because you see enormous amount of blown up Russian material, but that's basically how they get through defenses. That and heavy bombardments, both from aerial bombing and also enormous amount of MRL and artillery shelling. So, in my opinion, at least my humble opinion, the Russians won't be able to have these massive breakthroughs, or not even massive, these small breakthroughs that have been scaled up as being, massive defeats for Ukraine, like in Chasiv Yar, in Toretsk, Avdiivka, etc. If they don't have the firepower to back the infantry, and I think that at the end of the day, yes, Russia has a lot of manpower, and they can probably continue to pour a lot more manpower in. There's also a limit to that, but if their armored support and their artillery support is halting, there's only so much they can do on the battlefield.
It's true. It's all, that's one thing I've definitely learned from all this, is like, it's an interplay between everything. Everything's related. There's opportunity cost to everything. There's trade-offs. It's never as simple as like, well, just do the thing and you'll win the war. It's always more complicated.
Yeah, it is, very complicated, but at the same time, I think one of Russia's main strategies has always been a numeric superiority of both artillery and armored vehicles, and they still do, or at least in 2024, they still worked around that whole doctrine, even if it was less and less evident that they had what it took in numbers and also doctrinal systems to actually utilize that numeric superiority, and at the same time they did take some land, but and it might be decisive, maybe taking Velika Novosilka and Toretsk, and maybe if they manage to take Pokrovsk, that's going to be decisive, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be a long grind, field by field, through 2025 as well. I don't think we're going to see any massive Russian breakthroughs.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's even when the Russians have managed, aside from like the very early days of the war when the Ukrainians were arguably caught more or less by surprise, like the Russians haven't managed to ever, they've been in positions where they could have had breakthroughs and they weren't able to do it. Like whatever secret sauce a military has to have, whatever initiative I think the soldiers need to have to manage a breakthrough, I don't think they've managed to like really do it successfully. And there's been a few examples of that. I can't remember the name. There was like a bridge area. Anyway, there's been lots of examples of that, but yeah, I don't know. We could predict things all day. We're never able to predict. So we could have never predicted what happened at Kursk, right? Like that was just crazy. And I think same in Kharkiv to a certain extent. And I thought the other counteroffensive that Ukraine did was going to be a lot more successful, and it turned out not to be the case. So that's just the way it is. Like it's hard to say when things are going to be successful and when they're not, and why. And it's I don't know, easy to talk about it after the fact, but man, the fact that Ukraine has occupied Russian territory for this long is pretty mind-boggling, right? I mean, if you told me that at the beginning of the war that would have been the case, I would have spit out my drink, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah. By the way, caveat, or not? Yeah, caveat. These are my personal opinions, and
Yeah. Obviously, these are speculative questions. We're speculating, talking about the future. We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball, obviously, so we don't know.
Yep, exactly. And then there's been a question about from just my profile name. Will you cover the Defense Tech Innovation Forum 2025 from 18th to 25th of February in Kyiv? Well, I'm not sure if we will have any one in Kyiv, but I'm sure we're going to look at that. It's probably going to be under the scope of stuff that we look at anyways.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We could get some interviews at the Defense Tech trade. It's like a trade show, weapon trade show. Is that right?
Yeah. It's a conference in Kyiv.
Well, unless there's any other pressing questions, should we wrap it up here?
I guess this one is for Gao. Is Pokrovsk still standing? An achievement of defense or a Russian tactic was surrounding? Oh, I wish we had Andrew or Geek here right now, but
I think at this point, achievement of defense, right? I mean, there's been a lot of dooming about Pokrovsk for a long time, but I'm not saying it's like by any means out of the woods. But I would say the fact that it hasn't fallen yet would, if you told the guys like 3 months ago that Pokrovsk was still, holding good, I don't know if they might be surprised, or do you disagree?
Well, that's really hard to answer, but I think it's a combination of the Russian tactic being to surround these settlements, and it's been a pattern for the last 1.5 years, really. Instead of assaulting front directly on a large settlement or a city, they basically always go around. If that's a result of good defenses, probably a combination of that and also a tactic that they emphasize on. When the Russians are assaulting, they do a lot of probing attacks, and whenever they find a way where it's less defended or easier just because of terrain or other factors where they have success, they tend to go there. And in this case, we know that Prokhorovsk have been fortified, so going around it is just natural. What one would hope is that Ukraine emphasized on defending well also around Pokrovsk to ensure that it's going to be at least as difficult to go around as to go straight head on to the city. We might see Pokrovsk standing for a long time, or we might see it being abandoned within the first half of 2025, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's true. It's definitely been a case in the past where it's like, was it a testament to, or that's not the right word. Was it like evidence that Ukraine was defending really strong in a spot that they were able to hold it for so long, or was it like to a certain extent foolhardy, or they shouldn't have held that spot, right? Like, in other words, at a certain point, if Russia does truly surround them, it becomes more difficult to supply the soldiers in that area and defend that area, right? So at a certain point, it does make sense to withdraw tactically and fight another day, right? So there's been several cases of that, I would say, in the war, where I would say, even though things have already happened and we even have the benefit of hindsight, people don't agree necessarily like whether or not it was the right call to like hold a certain place because it was difficult to supply it and risky and so forth. So I don't know. I think it's like kind of comes down to personal opinions to a large degree, right? Whether or not you think it's worth it to hold territory or a strategic point versus keeping the army intact and withdrawing when it's sensible, right?
Yeah, but also there's a limit to how many of these cities that Ukraine can lose, and also how much terrain. At the end of the day, the overall strategy should, in my opinion, be for Ukraine to defend what they see as key nodes that is important to slow down the Russian offensive as much as possible, because there's no doubt, in my opinion, that the Russians are going to be on the offensive most for the rest of the war. And the hope really for Ukraine is that they just expand their forces and material to the extent at some point where they cannot fight anymore. So the strategy should be to defend areas where they can inflict as much losses on the Russians and take less losses themselves. So we just have to trust the general staff of Ukraine having planned this well out through 2025 and beyond, and that they're going to hold, and we're not going to see them closing in too much on the Dnipro, which in my opinion would be really a deal breaker for Ukraine.
Yep, just keep blowing up refineries, guys. Good luck. Any other questions, Erlend?
Not sure.
Well, I guess I'll just plug. Do we have any thing that we published on the website in the last 2 weeks, Erlend?
Not that I know of, so I don't think so.
Okay. Well, usually I would plug things on the website specifically, but this time I'll just give a general plug for the Tochnyi.info website. It's a great little website. Check it out. It's got lots of research. It's got, man, Erlend, by now, I mean, there's so many crazy things on there. There's the drone map. It's like a heat map. It'll show like all the specific places where drone strike videos happened. It'll show you like what happened. It'll show you like general frequencies of drone strikes and like what they hit. Like what, I mean, it shows all kinds of crazy stuff, right, Erlend? I mean, what are some other things on the website that's worth checking out?
You're talking about the articles that Daniele wrote.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying on the website, there's that and there's other stuff, right?
Yeah, and I know that Daniele is working on updating long range strike or deep strikes. That he's gonna do some focused on the refineries or oil energy, Russian energy in general, and ammo depots. There's a map of Russian ammo depots that have been attacked and that are not attacked. So yeah, there's slowly more and more stuff being added to the website and a lot of data focused material.
Yeah, there was that one that was written by, it was like a collaborative thing about like all the Russian units, right? Like how the Russian military units work.
Oh yeah, there's a couple of collaborative articles from several researchers about Russian logistic units, in specific both the units and also the locations or bases. And there's also one article heavily data focused. It's about the Russian involvement in Syria and also basically the cost it had on the Russian military complex from 2015 to 2024.
Yeah, see, lots of stuff. I feel like I proved it now. I'm satisfied, Erlend. I'll stop interrogating you. Thank you. Yeah, so lots of stuff on the website. As I belabored the point, you understand now, chat and audience. Thanks so much. So I think we'll probably wrap it here. Again, thanks to the panel for stopping in today and answering everybody's questions about Ukraine, what's going on. Thanks to chat for coming in, asking your questions. We always appreciate you guys stopping by live and liking the stream and all that. Thanks so much, you guys. We have a core audience. We really appreciate you guys helping us out on YouTube and always tuning in. Thanks to the people who watched the video after the fact, watch the broadcast later. We appreciate you guys too. We know not everyone can make it at 2100 every Sunday, Kyiv time. So yeah, you can come check us out live or you can watch the video on demand. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Thanks so much. We'll see everyone next week. Slava Ukraini.
Heroim Slava.
On behalf of the brave.